Your paycheck isn't everything. Having a good work-life balance is why I chose orthodontics, while I actually made a difference.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Through the Wire podcast. This is season 2, episode 6. My guest today is Dr. Ben Levenson. He is a practicing orthodontist here in Rochester, New York. I met Ben a couple years ago at Eastman because he did his orthodontic residency there. So if you're interested in hearing his experiences throughout dental school, throughout orthodontic residency, and now his experience working as an orthodontist, then stay tuned. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming on this podcast with me. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My guest today is Dr. Ben Levenson. I met him a couple years ago. He was an ortho resident when I met him, but now he's a practicing orthodontist. So thank you so much for coming on today. Dr. Ben Levenson, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your dental journey, your ortho journey, and now how it's going as an orthodontist.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, Erica, thank you for having me on the podcast. Excited to be here. So I'm originally from Western Massachusetts. I grew up in a small town there, and pretty much all my family, they were in the health field. So my dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse, and then my older sister is now a physician. So at a young age, I knew that I wanted to go into the health field. It wasn't until college where I started shadowing at a dental clinic. And that's kind of when I found out that this was something I wanted to pursue. I really liked the hands-on nature with dentistry in general. And shortly after my experience shadowing, I applied to dental school. So I went to the University of Maryland in Baltimore, graduated from there in 2022. And right out of dental school, I went on to residency where I went to Eastman, met Erica, had a great experience there. And currently, I am working at a private practice in Rochester, which is where I live now.
Okay. So it seems like you went to residency right after dental school. When in dental school did you decide you wanted to pursue orthodontics? Was it early on? Was it a little bit later? And then how did you make yourself a good applicant in order to be accepted right from dental school?
I think going into dental school, I had the idea that I wanted to specialize. I wasn't sure which specialty exactly. I think in my mind it was either ortho or pedo or oral surgery. I always stayed in touch with my orthodontist, just kind of kept tabs and asked him a lot of questions. And one thing that really stuck with me was that you have a really good work-life balance as an orthodontist. And I don't know if you can say that about every specialty, but that's kind of what drew me to orthodontics. I wanted to join something that was low stress, but also something that would challenge me every day. I think orthodontics encompasses that very well. And since I knew that going in to dental school, I made sure that I did my best academically so that when it came to applying, I had the marks, the grades, the extracurriculars that would make me stand out as an applicant. With that, I volunteered early on. I got involved with leadership opportunities. I shadowed local orthodontists. So I just kind of did everything I could to let programs know that this is something I've been thinking about for a while. And I feel like that definitely helped.
Okay. So would you say you got into dentistry knowing you wanted to do ortho? You knew you didn't want to be just a general dentist from day one?
I think I applied to dental school because I liked dentistry. I would have been fine being a general dentist. It's just that orthodontics stuck out to me more. And it's hard to put a finger on when I had that epiphany moment, but I felt like that was just something I would have enjoyed more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not to take away from general dentistry, it's a great profession.
So then you got into residency, and let's talk a little bit about how it compares to dental school. Was residency what you expected it to be? Was it easier? Was it harder? How would you compare it to your dental school experience?
Yeah, I went to Maryland, and the orthodontic program there, I felt like that was pretty secretive, so I didn't really know what went behind closed doors. So I didn't really know what to expect. What I was probably most anxious about was the social aspect, going from 135 people in your class to six. I didn't know if I was going to get along with my co-residents. I didn't know, what the social life would be, but it turned out that I got along with them very well. One thing I didn't like about dental school was that literally everything you did had to be checked by someone. So I felt like once residency started, there was a lot more freedom and independence with how you go about your day. So I really like that about residency. I decided to go to Eastman, which was a 2-year program. So I knew that it'd be a little bit more rigorous because it's jam-packed into 2 years versus three. I really enjoyed residency. I felt like at times it was less stressful than dental school. I didn't feel like I was competing with my classmates because everyone was there for the same reason. So I think that kind of took a lot of stress off of it, and I could just focus on the curriculum and trying to do my best as an orthodontic resident.
Okay. Do you remember what it was like when you got your acceptance letter?
Yeah,
How was that
so
experience if you
I
remember?
remember that it was a phone call, but I applied to, I believe, 15 programs. So I wanted to make sure I applied broadly, and I didn't want to do it again. So 15 programs, and I got 5 interviews. Um, the second one I had was with Eastman, who is non-match. And once I got that offer, I dropped out of the match because I didn't think I was going to get a better offer. So I remember it was late October of my D4 year. I got a phone call and they told me I was accepted. And I remember I was like studying for a dental exam before that, and I was just so happy that day because I knew that I'd be moving to Rochester.
Okay, yeah, congratulations for being accepted and now graduating ortho residency. How was the process of finding your first job as an orthodontist? When did you start looking? And just tell us a little bit about the process.
Yeah, that in itself was more stressful than I thought it would be. When I was applying and interviewing, it was probably early fall of my senior year. So I want to make sure that I started the process early so I could hopefully get a job lined up before I graduated. At the time, I was single and I was thinking about Boston and Philly because that's where my family lives. Shortly after I started that interview process, I started dating my now fiance, who is a general dentist and a native of Rochester. So quickly, I started looking at jobs in Rochester. So location was number one for me. And for those of you who don't know, Rochester is a very saturated market. And at the time, there were zero associate opportunities in Rochester. So I kind of had to expand my radius and I looked at jobs in Buffalo, Syracuse, Watertown, some towns I have never heard of before, because I wanted to make sure that I could work somewhere that was close enough to where my fiance lives, because I didn't want to have to see her on the weekends. So I ended up getting a job in Buffalo. It is a pediatric office, so orthodontics is kind of secondary. And for that reason, I felt like that job was a little disorganized. They paid really well, and I got full time, so I was working 4 days a week. And that started last August. And probably in October, I got a job offer in Rochester. So that definitely happened quicker than I would think. And since this January, I've been working at a new office, much closer to home, an easier commute, and a private orthodontic practice. So definitely something I was looking for, and I couldn't be happier with where I work now.
It seems like the ideal situation right now, coming
Yeah,
from like
no,
the outside. So it's good that you prioritized your relationships because it seems like everything
Yes,
else can come afterwards.
of course.
You mentioned that you worked full time. Do you get benefits when you work full time?
Yeah, in Buffalo, I got benefits. So, health insurance, dental insurance, 401k, all the basic things that you would get in a benefit package. And with my current job in Rochester, I also have access to benefits too.
Okay, that's
So,
good to know.
with a lot of private, or excuse me, part-time jobs, you don't get those benefits. So, that can be a little bit stressful. So, luckily, with my full-time position, I do have access to benefits.
Okay. Now talking about your first job, just graduating ortho, starting your first job, around how many patients did you see and like how was the treatment that you were providing and did you feel prepared or did you
Sure.
feel like you still needed to ask someone else?
Yeah, I felt like coming out of residency, I had a good foundation, but I knew that there was so much out there that I still had to learn. So every day there was a case where I didn't really know what the best call was. And unfortunately, I was the only doctor there. So I didn't really have someone right there who I could ask. And a lot of times I was winging it and taking educated guesses, which for the most part worked out fine. In Buffalo, it was similar to residency because they see Medicaid patients. So a lot of the cases are pretty complex. And unfortunately, a lot of the patients don't have great access to dental care. So a lot of impacted teeth and poor oral hygiene, not something that I typically see on a day-to-day basis at my current job. In the beginning, I was seeing maybe 20 patients a day with two assistants, so it was very manageable. They kind of eased me into it gradually. Eventually, I started seeing more patients and got more comfortable with my treatment planning. I feel like in residency with the Medicaid patients, we're kind of submitting insurance for everyone that walks in, whereas in the real world, not everyone's ready to start. So I think the goal should be to try and treat your patients to the highest standard in the shortest amount of time.
Hmm.
And sometimes when you're just submitting, when everyone walks in, they end up being in braces for 4 years when it could be 2 years. So I think that comes down to, the administration and who's handling that. And that's kind of why my Buffalo job was a little chaotic at times.
Okay. Is it because they weren't submitting to insurance? You mentioned that Eastman, they submit to insurance for each patient, but then in the one in Buffalo, are you saying they don't submit to insurance, so they stay in braces longer?
So from my experience in residency, we almost always submitted for patients no matter how old they were or how many primary teeth they had left. Whereas once I started working, I started to realize that not everyone's ready to start, so I wouldn't submit every case and only
Hmm.
submit the cases where I felt like they were ready to start.
Okay, and you're recommending that because it saves
Yes.
time. Okay.
I feel like in residency, you're trying to treat as many cases as you can in a short, 2 years. So you do get a lot of good experience, but I don't know if it's necessarily the best for the patient.
I see. Okay. So now at your current job, around how many patients are you seeing and what is it like working there now that you're seeing what it seems like less Medicaid patients? It seems like you're seeing patients that brush their teeth and that I'm assuming are more compliant. How is that experience going?
Yeah, so my current job, we probably see anywhere from 35 to 50 patients, depending on the day. I usually have 2 to 3 assistants who are amazing, very capable. They make my job a lot easier. In terms of compliance, it's definitely better. Some kids still don't brush their teeth and some kids still don't wear their elastics, but it's definitely better than the populations in a residency program. there is a lot more self-pay, obviously, because we're doing less Medicaid. So I feel like as a new doctor, there's a lot more pressure when those patients, if you recommend a treatment plan, they're ready to start. Whereas with insurance, you kind of have, 6 to 8 weeks of wiggle room
Mm.
to finalize the treatment plan. So with those private insurance, you need to know what your plan is within 30 seconds and stick to it. So
Okay.
that in itself is a little bit of a stressor.
So how was the first experience, like your first experience when you did a consult with the patient and then they accepted? How was that experience? Because I know in residency you work up the case with your big and then with the faculty, and then you like present it to the patient, and then you probably have a couple days to start the treatment. So,
Right.
um, so tell me about like your fastest turnaround time.
Yeah, so since we're doing a fair amount of Invisalign cases, we have the ability to do a same day start. So if you give a treatment plan, they accept it, you're scanning them that day.
Mm.
And with Invisalign, as you know, there's a little bit of a turnaround to get the treatment plan back. So I knew that I would still have some wiggle room to, come up with a treatment plan.
Hmm.
More specifics, but for the most part, if you're recommending like non-extraction versus extraction, surgical versus non-surgical, that's something you need to know right off the jump and stick to it. But some of the things like how you're going to wear elastics, when you're going to wear them, I feel like those things you can kind of decide later. There were a lot of consults where I thought I gave a great plan and the patient didn't accept. So, as a young doctor, I feel like there was, a little bit of doubt, like, did I give the right plan? But a lot of times, maybe patients just don't want to pay it, or they have other consults lined up. So, as I got more comfortable with it, I realized that it's not necessarily something I'm doing wrong. So that is a adjustment.
Okay. I've heard that
Yeah.
for orthodontists, it's really important to get referrals. Do you feel like you've had to go out into the community and network with dentists to get referrals, or since you work with another orthodontist, you don't really have to do that part?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to join a practice that is pretty established in the area. So they already have a good source of referrals, but the specific office that I work at, the old doctor retired. So my boss and the practice owner will schedule monthly, lunches with general practitioners just so they can meet me and put a face to a name because now they're referring to me and not the older doctor. That is something that has become pretty regular, meeting with general doctors in the area.
All right. So what has been the most surprising thing that you've learned this year? Like a lesson that you learned this year, your first year out working as an orthodontist?
Yeah, I think what I've realized is that the most challenging thing working in the real world is not necessarily the mechanics of how you do your orthodontics or the diagnosing and the treatment planning, but more so patient communication, because I feel like that is the hardest part, making patients happy and building that trust and relationships from the beginning. That is something that I'm working on every day. And I feel like as a young doctor, we're kind of at a disadvantage because parents may not necessarily trust you as much as a older, more weathered doctor. So I think that surprised me that I was going to have to work more on patient communication than actual diagnosing and treatment planning.
Like gaining the parents' trust. When you
Yeah,
say patient communication, do you mean like if we're talking about a child communicating with them so they're compliant, or communicating with the patient so they accept the treatment?
I think, yeah. So communicating with the patient for compliance, things like that is definitely important. But what's probably more important is the parents, um, and just making sure that everyone's on the same page. Because if Billy's not wearing his rubber bands, you don't want the parents to know that halfway into treatment. because then they're going to be upset when you tell them, oh, his teeth are straight, but we can't fix the bite because he hasn't been wearing his rubber bands. So establishing a rapport with the parents from day one,
Hmm.
I found is really important and makes the day-to-day a lot more smooth.
I think we're all working on communication, so I'm glad that you've brought it up. So, what advice do you have for me and all the other incoming residents now that you've finished residency and how you've been working for a whole year? What advice would you give an incoming ortho resident?
I would say that, you've worked so hard these past several years from college to dental school. You've done everything you could to get into a program. Now it's time to have fun with it and try to relax and not get too stressed and just enjoy the process. You're going to find that some faculty are flexible with how you treatment plan, while others are more opinionated. But there are many ways to treat a case, and just because someone is opinionated in how they want to do it doesn't mean that your plan is wrong. So I think not taking things personal as a resident, if a faculty doesn't like your treatment plan. I think also that there is so much to learn in orthodontics, and don't feel like you have to learn everything in those 2 to 3 years. A lot of it comes out in the real world in practice. But I think, having fun, getting to know your co-residents pretty well, and doing things with them outside of school will make that journey a lot more fun and easy.
Okay, I think that's great advice. Something I thought of now that you mentioned residents and fun. Now that you don't have like co-residents and you don't have like your dental school classmates, how is it working like by yourself or just with one orthodontist? Have you felt isolated or have you felt like it's a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my social life has changed since a lot of my friends aren't around anymore. But luckily, as an associate, when I get home from work, there's not really much I have to tend to. So I would say that I find plenty of time to have fun outside of work. I spend most of my time with my fiance, going to the gym, going on hikes. Now that the weather's nice, taking advantage of that. So that's one great thing about being an associate is you don't have to worry about managing a staff.
Hmm.
Um, so I think something I said in the beginning, having a good work-life balance is why I chose orthodontics, and I feel like I'm reaping the benefits now. That may change in the future, but for right now, it's kind of what I was hoping for.
Yeah, enjoy it while you can. I mean, you worked really hard
Exactly.
for it, so that's
Yeah.
good. And I'm assuming you're getting paid well. What you're getting paid, is it what you thought you would get paid as a first year orthodontist?
So when I took my job in Buffalo, I was getting paid very well, more than all my other co-residents. But what I've realized is that your paycheck isn't everything, and I wasn't getting enough out of that job. So when I took the position in Rochester, I did take a pay cut, but
Mm-hmm.
now I work 5 days a week versus four to kind of balance it out, and getting a lot more out of it with mentorship and being in a practice that has an established referral network. So you kind of just have to make some sacrifices, but the pay I get right now, I'm happy with. It's a good pay. I would like more, but that will come in time.
Okay, we're wrapping up now. Do you have any other final words of advice?
I would say just trust the process for those that are still in dental school. Work really hard, and if you don't get in the first time, try again. If this truly is where you want to be in your life, no one can take that passion away from you. So really, just continue to do your best. And when you get to that point where you're a resident, like I was saying before, enjoy it and have fun with it, because orthodontics is a great profession and you get to give back to people help them with their confidence. And at the end of the day, it's really rewarding. So you get to go home thinking, wow, I actually made a difference in someone's life. I think that's kind of the advice I would have. If anyone ever has any questions about my journey, I'm sure Erica, you can share my email. I'm happy to communicate with you that way.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you so much for coming on, Ben.